Welcome to BIS. This is the Bionicle Inspiration Series, a show where we cover the Bionicle MOCs of the community to kind of get you a little bit inspired, to give you some ideas, to maybe expand your mocking process, because no matter how experienced you may be, there's always something to learn for some cool stuff that people have done. So today, this episode is going to be on Gundam. Now, we've often talked about the idea of episodes kind of being inspired by like a concept or a theme. So what I'm going to do with this episode is let's take Gundam as a whole, because it seems that a lot of people in the Bionicle community really like Gundam. It's either a sort of a sub hobby or they take a lot of inspiration from Gundam in some fashion. So yeah, let's take that and sort of imagine that we are going to build one ourselves. And let's look at what some people have done and sort of study some of the parts that are similar, some of the parts that are different, and what we might do if we were building our own kind of Gundam-inspired MOC. So we're going to pay specific attention to things that, people have done differently or similarly. So let's take a look at a source image of a Gundam as a whole. So here are various photos of Gundam, things that we can sort of see. Some of them have really cool-looking robotic wings that sort of seem to translate themselves very nicely into Bionicle, because they don't really have that sort of feathered effect where it would possibly require hundreds of different pieces to kind of perfectly match that individual feather feel that a wing has, or the sort of skin-like dragon wings. They don't have that. They're individual sort of beams. So that sort of lends itself to a sword or any kind of Bionicle piece. They also have really cool robotic heads and this kind of cool crest design. Quite often they have that on a Gundam. And they also have this kind of jutting out chest, as well as this sort of waistcoat design thing. So let's see how some people have turned sort of very traditional Gundam overall concept and shape into Lego. So we're going to begin with a MOC by Avery Robertson, and this one is called OZ-16MS Gundam Cronius. Very cool, very awesome MOC. So let's immediately begin by making some comparisons to the original source material of Gundam. So let's take a look at the head. He's very nicely matched that sort of general crest shape that Gundam seem to have on the top of their heads, simply by attaching two of those Hero Factory arms, not Hero Factory arms, those Exoforce arms on the top there in yellow, and sort of semi-illegally attaching them on one of those system-modified plates there. And that's a really clever way to do it, isn't it? Who says if you're attaching something, it needs to fit into traditional connecting terms? You can go semi-illegal, fully illegal, whatever kind of technique you want. Now, I say semi-illegal because technically the term for illegal technique means you're putting stress on a part, and I don't think that's actually putting stress on a part. So I'm kind of classifying that as like semi-illegal. I feel like I'm making that up, though. Some of you would definitely classify that as illegal. Whatever. But yeah, I think that's a very clever way to address that, and fits very well with the source material, so that's very nice. Also really cool to see how heavily that head focuses on the lime eyepiece there. Now, obviously, that is just a 1x2 lime Lego system plate, and it really becomes a focal point on the head, really makes it pop. It's cool how that is how the eye design is done. The head is very primarily system focused and really gets the job done. It really matches the source material very, very well. Let's take a look at the weapon, a very, very nicely designed weapon. Cool how it uses that Lego missile piece there as sort of like an energy conduit kind of thing. Looks fantastic and works very nicely with that overall blade. And even cooler how the staff itself uses a lot of these sort of hinged Technic connectors to get this really cool scythe curve shape to it. It makes a very original looking shape and gets the job done in a very unique and nice way. So we said that a lot of the Gundams sort of have this sort of interesting waistcoat design. Very interesting how Avery has done this here. He has kind of, again, focused more primarily on system. It's nice how a lot of the highlights on this Mocha system, while as the rest is very heavily Bionicle or CCBS. If, for example, you take a look at the legs, they're literally just Anika legs with a little bit of details put on top, and that looks fantastic. But then partnering that in with some additional system parts really makes it pop. So adding in those little extra details is a really nice addition. I definitely recommend trying that. Go for a very simplistic Bionicle frame, but then layer it on with a bunch of just different system parts, or even just smaller Bionicle parts, kind of like we've seen on the lower leg there, because it looks great. Anyway, let's not get off topic. What we were talking about before with the waistcoat, yeah, it's very much system, uses a lot of big slopes and curve slopes and things like that, and really gets the job done. It's attached there with a nice little mixel joint, so it wouldn't necessarily hinder posability, which is very nice. Also cool to see the color blocking on this. we mentioned before Gundam sort of have this interesting jutting out kind of chest design, which this very much has. And it's nice how that little pocket there is all green and the rest of the green is very much contained. And same with the red. There's just small little attachments and small little highlights. And it really gets the job done. It just looks very nice. I think that's a very nice way to do some color blocking. Not needing to worry too much about additional accent colors. Just putting them in smaller blocks. I think it's really cool. So yeah, very awesome what Avery has done here with his Gundam-inspired MOC. And very interesting to see how a lot of that translates back to the original sources that we saw. So let's take a look at the next MOC, which is by Patrick Biggs, and is called Gundam Wing something. So let's take a look at the crest, because that's what we begun with on the last MOC. Now, we've seen some of the original source material, we saw how Avery did it, and now we've seen how Patrick has done it. Both of them have used the Exoforce arms in yellow, but Patrick has angled them outwards and added a bunch of system hands and a few other nice little details. So it's really cool, isn't it, to see how he's sort of added a bit more to it. And in this circumstance, it looks fantastic. Whereas with Avery's design, it still looked really, really good, but the MOC itself was a little more simplistic as a whole, so maybe that design worked a bit better. So I guess it's something to ask yourself if you were building a Gundam, Do I want to kind of branch out a little more and add a lot of detail, or do I just want little nice amounts of it? So I think it's really cool what Patrick has done, as well as what Avery's done. Let's talk about these wings, because we mentioned before how a lot of Gundam MOCs have some wing designs on them, and they can really enhance the character in really unique ways. And I love what Patrick has done because they're super simple. Some of the old, and even some of the newer Ninjago Dragon sets came with a lot of these parts for wings. And really, you could buy one set and recreate that wing design. You just need some of those mixel joints to connect them, as we can see here. Add some boat studs and other things on the back just to structurally make sure that they're not going to fall off. And bam, you have a really fantastic wing design, You don't need to worry about it being too complex, because sometimes wings can be really difficult, Like we mentioned before, getting that kind of feathered effect can require a lot of parts and just be really hard to maintain. Whereas this is very, very few parts, but gets the job done and looks fantastic. So a very nice wing design to keep in mind there. So not something that we saw in Avery's MOC, but yet really works with this MOC, and would probably have worked really well with Avery's MOC. But, do you want wings? Is that the kind of character you're going for? Let's also take a look at the eyes here. Again, using lime, which is very interesting. Good to note. However, this time he's not used a system plate. He's used some of the, what looks to be, the smaller claw or horn pieces for the eye there. And that's a really nice way to do that, and the color certainly pops in contrast with the white and red color scheme. So that's another interesting way to do that. Maybe instead of using a system part, you use some horns, or grab any other part that comes in lime and just experiment with it. Maybe it would work really well. Also really interesting to note that the chest designs are very, very similar on these two MOCs. But Patrick seems to have expanded upon it a little more, adding in a nice sort of orange system band there to really make it pop a bit more and to kind of add a little bit more depth to it. This MOC seems to be a little bit bulkier than Avery's, so it's cool to note that he sort of expanded on it slightly. And that kind of goes the same way with the waistcoat design. Avery's was sort of just on the sides, whereas Patrick's sort of flows more onto the back and the front. And again, it uses system. And again, system is used here, which is very interesting. You could easily possibly do that with Bionicle, but both builders have chosen to do it with system. So again, if you're looking at this for inspiration, either you could do the same and, build a waistcoat that's system, or why not branch out and try it in Bionicle? But again, very cool how these seem to be attached either with clips or mixel joints, whatever, and may not necessarily hinder posability so much. And the final thing on this, really, really nice weapon design. Nothing too complex, but just the little additions of those wings there really gets a very nice flair to that weapon, and it being such a bright green in contrast with everything else just really makes the weapon pop and really improves the MOC so much, and is a really lovely addition. So that's really cool, isn't it? To examine the two, see the similarities, see the differences, and then think, okay, well, where can my MOC fit? Or will I sort of branch out and be kind of an outlier and, do something totally different to what other people have done? Or am I going to stick a little closer to the source material and try it in a new way? Or maybe you saw something in the source material that these guys didn't. Maybe I can use this piece instead, or try this instead. So I think it's really cool to look at it like that. Speaking of branching out and going outside the box, let's look at the final MOC. Now, this is by Mood Swim, otherwise known as Kevin Reichel, and this is called X-Wing Gundam. Now, so far we've just seen very stereotypical Gundam MOCs, very much inspired and based off original sort of source material. Whereas this is a very unique take on a Gundam. It's taking the basic Gundam frame, we see some of the wings like before, and the jutting out chest, the waistcoat, and the cool horns and stuff. But he's combined it with Star Wars to create a very awesome looking X-Wing inspired Gundam. And how awesome is that? What a great way to take the original concept, but turn it into something totally new and different, and merge two of the coolest things into one awesome thing. So why not try that? Why not combine it with another theme? Or you don't have to be as blatant as that. You don't have to necessarily go, I'm going to combine Star Wars and Gundam. You could go, well, I'm going to take this concept that they have in Star Wars and put it on a Gundam-inspired mock, but make it an original character, So you just take a small concept, not outright saying, oh, this is Star Wars inspired, and adding it into that. For example, instead of adding a lightsaber onto your mock, you could go, well, I'm adding a kind of laser sword thing. It's not actually a lightsaber, but, an aspect of the weapon has a, laser in it that you could cut stuff with. That sort of thing, branch out, see what you can do. Anyway, let's look at those wings. So obviously those are very heavily inspired by X-Wing's wings, and it's cool to add the guns on the tips there. Very nice addition. Even just some of the little details, kind of like the typical paint job on an X-Wing that we see in episode 4, it's very nice how that really makes that pop. Now, obviously, again, that is inspired by Star Wars, but you could easily put that on whatever kind of mock you want. Why not build a very system-inspired or system-heavy wing design and use a lot of plates and slopes and stuff to be able to get those additional patterns and colors in there? Another thing we see with the system, which is sort of throughout the mock, but also a little bit is on the wings, we get to use some of these printed tiles, which have sort of greebled textures on them, or symbols like the Rebel Alliance symbol and stuff like that. And that's really cool, isn't it? To use those parts that are either printed or stickered to add a little bit more depth to the mock. Isn't that awesome? So why not try doing that as well? Something I think is really cool here with the waistcoat. Now, it's a little bit different. It's not... It's angled in a slightly different way to the other two mocks that we see. And it really allows for a lot more leg posability without the waistcoat having to move so much. And it allows you to really focus in on the greebles on the upper leg there, which is really awesome, isn't it? Because that in itself is fairly Star Wars-like, and it's also sort of straying away from the other things that we saw in the past two mocks. So I think it's really cool. That's another original take on that. Speaking of original take, the horns on this guy's head are not done with any Exoforce parts and are instead simply done with some of the Lego Harpoon parts, as well as a couple other various different cores and stuff like that. And that's really awesome to see, isn't it? To see that horn design done in an entirely new and different way, as well as another very system-heavy head design, which looks a little more like a Transformer and a little less like a Gundam, to some degree. So that's really cool, isn't it? And we spoke about this before as well. He's given the mock a lightsaber. Nothing's cooler than a lightsaber. Maybe you can give your mock a lightsaber. Exactly. So, yeah. There's a lot to love about this, and sure, it's very system-heavy and not very Bionicle, but maybe you want to do that with your mocks. These days seem to be moving towards a more system-heavy design, so why not go very system-heavy? Why not do very similar to this mock, but add little bits of Bionicle here and there? See how it affects the mock. You never know. So yeah, fantastic idea by Kevin here to combine two themes like that into one really fantastic-looking mock, and great work from all three builds today. So yeah, I think in this episode, it was a little different to the traditional style. We looked at very similarly designed mocks, and the different ways that those mocks were, very similar or very different, and the ways that they kind of overlapped, and different ways to approach the same thing. And I think that's always important. If you get stuck on something when you're building something, or maybe you're in a mocking block because you don't know the next step to take on a mock, approach it from a different angle. See what other people have done. Because here are three mocks of essentially the same thing, yet done in three very different ways, as well as three very similar ways, but with slight different tweaks and stuff like that. So yeah, know that there's always a different route that you can take. And yeah, just play, man. That's always my advice, is just play, because that's what it's about. That's about it. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any future suggestions for mocks that you'd like to see on the show, be sure to check the links in the description, because there are some places where you can message me and send me a message with future theme ideas, or post some of your mocks with a link, and I'll happily put them in my backlog, and one day they'll make it into an episode. Also, be sure to check the links in the description for the mocks that you saw in today's episode, and check out these fantastic builders, see some of the great stuff that they've done. Anyway, that about wraps it up for this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed. Happy building. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.